Today we're talking about the number that controls the universe. And one of those numbers we're going to be taking a look at today is in the thumbnail of this video. And the physicist Richard Feynman said about this number, "It's one of the greatest damn mysteries of physics, a magic number that comes to us with no understanding by man. You might say the hand of God wrote that number, and we don't know how he pushed his pencil." So it's going to be a really good stream. We're taking a look at a couple different numbers and see exactly how they really destroy the paradigm of science and show that reality is inherently mathematical. So let's dive into this by taking a look at an article from mindmatters.ai. It's quickly becoming one of my favorite sites. I really like the articles they have on this, where it says this article is titled "Numbers Control the Universe." And of course, you know, this is our position exactly. So it's one that we must talk about. In Carl Sagan's Contact, the extraterrestrials embedded a message in the irrational number pi, the circumference of a circle divided by its radius. But some other numbers are critical to the structure of our universe too, and why they are critical does not make obvious sense. Perhaps the most fundamental and mysterious one is the fine structure constant of the universe. So we're going to be talking about a couple different numbers today. We're going to talk about the number that controls the universe, but let's talk about the fine structure constant of the universe. And here's a quote about this. "Seemingly harmless, a random number with no units or dimensions has cropped up in so many places in physics and seems to control one of the most fundamental interactions in the universe." Now, I'm going to point out something important in that paragraph right there, but let's finish it first. "Its name is the fine structure constant, and it's a measure of the strength of the interaction between charged particles and the electromagnetic force. The current estimate of the fine structure constant is 0.00729735255693, with an uncertainty of 11 on the last two digits. The number is easier to remember by its inverse, approximately 1 over 137. If it had any other value, life as we know it would be impossible, and yet we have no idea where it comes from. So I've heard other estimates say that if this number were off by just 4%, which is a very low percentage when you take a look at this decimal number, life would be impossible. So two things to look at here that I want to point out. First of all, if it had any other value, life as we know it would be impossible, and yet we have no idea where it comes from. So you will see that this number, the fine structure constant, is integral to the stability of the universe. The universe would not be able to support life if this constant did not exist. We're going to see that this constant is based on very fundamental aspects of existence, such as the speed of light and things like this, having to do with the electromagnetic force and electrons. It's based on these things. But before we talk about that, I want to point something else out. So they have no idea where this number comes from. Okay, that's another thing to put out there. But also, this number seems to control one of the most fundamental interactions in the universe. And this number has no units or dimensions. Now that's really important as well. So what that means is that this number has no units or dimensions. What that means is when we think of numbers that do have units or dimensions, it's in terms of some physical property. So for example, 5 feet, 3 seconds, 2 kilograms. Seconds, feet, kilograms. This particular number, the fine structure constant, doesn't have any units. It's not feet, seconds, kilograms, or anything of that nature. It is simply a pure number. Yet this pure number that has no dimensionality, no units whatsoever, so would be divorced from any sort of physical property, controls the universe, or does not control the universe, but has to do with one of the, we're going to talk about the number that does control the universe, but this one has to do with one of the most fundamental interactions in the universe, such that if it were different, life as we know it would be impossible. So the answer to, so first of all, the question, well, you have no idea where it comes from because reality is mathematical. As Pythagoras said, all is number, number controls the universe. That's what Pythagoras said. All is number, numbers control the universe. So this number is not something that comes from anywhere. It's not something in terms of any physical attribute. It is a dimensionless, unitless, pure number that is responsible for, one of the numbers responsible for life being possible. So just think, that's something to just think about for a moment and realize that reality relies on this thing that is not in terms of any dimensions or units. It's not like feet, not like seconds, not like kilograms or anything like of that nature. So it's just a pure number. So let's continue. Many famous scientists have reflected on 1 over 137, or the fine structure constant. We read this quote. The brilliant physicist Richard Feynman famously thought so, saying that there is a number that all theoretical physicists of worth should worry about. He called it one of the greatest damn mysteries of physics, a magic number that comes to us with no understanding by man. What's special about alpha, and that's another way to refer to the fine structure constant, is alpha. What's special about alpha is that it's regarded as the best example of a pure number, one that doesn't need units. It actually combines 3 of nature's fundamental constants: the speed of light, the electric charge carried by 1 electron, and the Planck's constant, as explains physicist and astrobiologist Paul Davies to Cosmos magazine. Appearing at the intersection of such key areas of physics as relativity, electromagnetics, and quantum mechanics is what gives 1 over 137 its allure. So I won't, I want to get through this article, so I won't beat this into the ground, but realize the importance of what's being said here. Don't gloss over this. There is a pure number that is based on fundamental attributes, such as the speed of light, such as Planck's constant. I won't get into exactly what, if you're familiar with Hyperianism, you know why these numbers are extremely important. But this is a pure number, no units, no dimensions, and yet the universe relies on it. Nobelist Wolfgang Pauli is famous for the Pauli exclusion principle, is said to have remarked, "When I die, my first question to the devil will be, what is the meaning of the fine structure constant?" You know what I like about this quote too? Is that he assumes he's going to hell. It's not like when I die, my first question to God will be. When I die, my first question to the devil will be. I love that. He's just like, yeah, I'm going to hell, and that's fucking awesome because religion often hates reason, and so this first question to the devil will be, because that satanic mathematics. I can't tell you how many times people come in here and go like, oh, that person's a Satanist, and it's like, we talk about math. What? Anyway, University of Nottingham physics professor Lawrence Eves thinks the number 1 over 137 would be good for starting communication with intelligent aliens, as they would be likely to know about it and to realize they were dealing with other intelligent entities. So, and this is another thing important to understand, is that if we wanted to communicate with aliens, we wouldn't do so with language, but we would be able to do so with mathematics, because mathematics is a universal language. Even though we might use different symbols to express a certain thing, we use a certain notation to express 1 over 137, and we use a certain base system. Now, an alien life form definitely will use different notation, different symbols, and very much most likely will use a different base system, but that doesn't matter because ultimately it still refers to the same thing. Just like, if there's a cat over there, I might refer to it as a cat, but someone from Japan would refer to it as neko. I believe that's the name for cat in Japanese, is neko. This is a really cute name, by the way. So even though I say cat and they say neko, it still refers to the same thing. So that's the same idea when you think of mathematical notation, is that even though an alien species may use different symbols and a different base system than us, it still refers to the same universal truth. Here's another. Okay, so that's one thing. We're going to talk about a few different numbers here, because the fine structural constant is very important, but it's not the number that controls the universe. We will be talking about the number that controls the universe in just a minute here. So here's another thought-provoking number. Consider the irrational number known as phi, or phi. I'll talk about that too. Or the golden ratio. So this comes up a lot, all right? So probably a lot of people's ears in my audience may perk up at the mention of phi or phi or the golden ratio, because in New Age thought, they refer to phi all the time as being what reality is based on. But what I'm going to show you in a minute is that what reality is actually based on, phi relies on it. In other words, phi is not fundamental. There is something more fundamental that phi arises from. So phi is not base reality. Phi is not the thing where all reality relies upon it, but it is an expression of reality, which we will talk about. By the way, before that, yeah. So phi or phi, right? Before we get into this, heavy nature of reality stuff, let's talk about this for a minute. So phi, yes, phi is actually pronounced phi, right? That's how one should pronounce phi. It should really be phi. But here's the issue. Think about the number pi. It should really be pronounced p. Phi is pronounced p. Pi really is p. But I'm not going to call it p. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to continue to call it pi, because I don't like p. Anyway, so among the mysteries, so this is a quote. Where is this? Oh, so this is a quote now talking about phi or phi. Among the mysteries of the irrationals, one number holds a special place, the so-called golden ratio. The golden ratio's value is about 1.618, but not exactly 1.618, since then it would be the ratio 1,618 over 1,000, and therefore not irrational. And it's also referred to the Greek letter phi, which is pronounced phi if you're a mathematician, and phi if you're in a fraternity. So hey, if you're gonna say phi, you gotta say p. You gotta say p if you're saying phi. You gotta be consistent. Gotta be consistent. So if you want an exact description of the golden ratio, it can be expressed as 1/2 multiplied by 1 plus square root 5. That's not important, but we find this number everywhere too. The golden ratio is sometimes called the divine proportion because of its frequency in the natural world. The number of petals on a flower, for instance, will often be a Fibonacci number. The seeds of sunflowers and pine cones twist in opposing spirals of Fibonacci numbers. Even the side of an unpeeled banana will usually be a Fibonacci number, and the number of ridges on a peeled banana will usually be a larger Fibonacci number. So real quick, I want to talk about phi or phi. So, phi, you've seen, I'm sure if you've seen any New Age sort of thing, I think they even show it right here. You can see in this video, this golden spiral, right? The golden ratio, and then there's this golden spiral, and you'll often see imagery where the golden spiral is overlaid over things in existence and saying, oh, look, this all conforms to the golden ratio. You can see it in plants and different patterns. And yes, that is true. You can see this pattern everywhere. But I want to get across that the golden ratio is not what is fundamental. So let's talk about a minute. We're going to continue. Let me see how long we have here. Yeah, so we're going to continue here, but before we do, I want to talk about the number that does control the universe and what it has to do with why it's more fundamental than phi. So the number that does control the universe is 0. 0 is the number that controls the universe. And if anyone's familiar with my work in Hyperianism, this is no surprise. But if you're new here, let me explain a little bit why. Because zero is not emptiness. So if we think of 0 can also be expressed as a circle centered at the origin, because if you add up all of the values of the circumference of a circle centered at the origin, you get 0. So basically the value of 0 in total, the value of a circle in total is 0. So if we have 0, we ipso facto have a circle. We can express that. We can express that 0 as a circle. Now, in Hyperianism, this is expressed as what we call the source formula and what mathematicians and physicists know as Euler's formula. And this is a very important formula, e to the I x equals cosine x plus I sine x in its simplified form. And what this does is it is a circle. It is a circle. So it is overall net 0, just like a regular circle, but it incorporates not just real numbers, but imaginary and complex numbers as well. And what's important about this is that, first of all, it incorporates all numbers within itself. So you have unity and completeness. Very important to have unity, consistency, and completeness, because reality can't contain any errors or anything, or else it would collapse. So you have 0, which is equivalent to the source formula, Euler's formula, which is a complex circle centered at the origin. Now, this is also, what's also very important about this is that a circle is also equivalent to waves. Frequencies. So again, e to the I x equals cosine x plus I sine x. These are sinusoids. Cos x, sine x. These are sinusoids. So 0 can be expressed as the net result of a circle, which can be expressed as the net result of sinusoids. So this is really important, because if you can have one 0, you can have a vast multiplicity of zeros. So you can have a vast multiplicity of circles, which means you can have a vast multiplicity of frequencies. If you want to know more about this, I go into this in great detail in my book, Ontological Mathematics, The Science of the Future. You can also read about it in some of the pioneering works of Dr. Thomas Stark and Mike Hockney. But I'm giving a very brief, concise overview. All right. So this is, from 0, you get ontologically a vast multiplicity of sinusoidal waves or frequency patterns. Now, we know, and quantum mechanics shows that, reality is ultimately fundamentally wave-like in nature. So we can use these waves via Fourier transforms to construct any wave structure, no matter how complicated. So to put something that could take years to really learn in a simplistic way, 0 ultimately can be expressed as a vast multiplicity of frequency patterns that then can be expressed in a space-time transform of any sort of wave structure, no matter how complicated, even as complicated as the universe itself. In other words, all reality, all existence, everything around you can be broken down into frequencies that all result in 0. So reality is this 0 that we are experiencing piecemeal in certain pieces. We're not experiencing all of reality all at once. If we experienced all reality all at once, it would resolve to 0. But since we're looking at pieces and portions of it, we are having that experience of frequencies that don't net, because we're not experiencing the total. So anyway, the reason why this is important is because, first of all, this is the number that controls existence. 0 as expressed by the net result of Euler's formula. So really, Euler's formula is what controls. Euler's formula is what controls the universe, but it can be expressed as 0. So we can say 0 is the number that controls the universe. But it's very important, it's not just any old 0, it's 0, specifically 0, that we arrive at through the expression of Euler's formula. And this is what controls the universe. This is what gives rise to everything. And this is pure mathematics. This is pure frequency information. This is why we can have things like the fine structure constant that's unitless. It's not in meters, it's not in seconds, it's not in kilograms, because fundamental reality is not in meters, seconds, or kilograms. It's pure mathematics, pure information, and expressed as frequency. So it's a frequency domain. So true fundamental reality is pure frequency, and we can understand this like a pure number. And that's why we have pure numbers that end up being responsible for the structure of the universe being possible. Because the structure of the universe doesn't rely on meters and seconds and kilograms. Those arise, but what the universe relies on is number. Reality is number. It's the same thing as saying reality is mathematics. It's the same thing as saying reality is frequency, because mathematics is ontologically expressed as frequency. And it's the same thing as saying reality is mind, because this is a dimensionless structure that is not in any sort of spatio-temporal terms. It's in terms of frequency. Therefore, it's not material, it's thought. And all reality depends on subjectivities. Now, we won't get into, I could show how this mathematics also implies subjective minds that experience. I could show, but again, this would be super long, and I want to get through this because this is a great article. And anyway, the reason why that I'm also bringing this up is because I want to show. See, you'll show the golden ratio and phi and all this, and a lot of New Agers will be like, "Ooh, this is the responsible for everything. This is the foundation of reality." And no, it's perfect. I mean, it's beautiful and wonderful and a brilliant expression of mathematics, but it's not ultimate reality. We can express phi through Euler's formula. Like, we can use Euler's formula to express phi. And also, what I want you to note about the golden spiral is, what is a spiral reliant on? It's reliant on circles. If circles did not exist, you couldn't have a spiral. So Euler's formula is what is fundamental. Cyclical sinusoidal reality. That's base reality. Cyclical and sinusoidal. Now, this will give rise to things like the golden ratio and things like the golden spiral. That will come from it. But it's not what is ultimately fundamental. It's a very important part of it. Very important part of it. But I just want to put that out there because, like, yeah, again, there's a lot of misconceptions with a lot of New Age and mystical information. Like, again, you'll also see a lot of sacred geometry out there too. Sacred geometry comes from Plato's Timaeus. And it's an interesting idea, but it's really outdated. So sacred geometry, was an idea put forward by Plato, where he was like, "Ooh, fire is hot. It's made of triangles because triangles are pointy, and ouch." That was really his sort of line of thinking, which for back then is great. You get into the geometrical nature of reality. You see how it corresponds to experience. It's really cool insights. But we've developed more since then. So a lot of the New Age mystical beliefs, you have them sort of way in the past believing in sacred geometry, which is sort of the equivalent of believing, that reality is made of earth, air, wind, and fire. Like, we've evolved from there. We know a lot more about atoms and dealing with physical reality. It's very outdated. So patterns like geometry, like sacred geometry, come from the base mathematical reality. So ultimate reality is mathematical, but it's not sacred geometry, and it's not the golden spiral. Those result from base reality being cyclical and sinusoidal, containing all numbers within itself. So let's continue. So we're continuing here. Then there is pi, or P, which outside of Carl Sagan's novel and film burbles on forever without forming a pattern, yet is fundamental in nature too. Let's see, the number crops up and let me talk about, okay, so here's the thing. Why, this is really important. Why is pi so important to nature? Pi implies a circle. Pi is the circumference of the ratio of the circumference to the diameter of a circle. So and remember, reality is based on Euler circles and the accompanying sinusoids. So it has pi built into it, which means pi is an aspect of the fundamental nature of reality. You can't have a circle without pi. You have a circle, you have pi. They go together. You can't have one without the other. If you have a circle, it's going to have pi, and if you have pi, there's going to be a circle. You can't divorce them. They're built into one another. So the number crops up in the natural world too. So talking about pi. The number, and let me just say real quick, when I say that you can't have one without the other, you can't have a circle without pi, and you can't have pi without a circle. What I'm saying there is when we're talking about ontology, and what I mean by there is when we're talking about ontology. Because yes, if you're doing abstract mathematics, you can consider the number pi just on its own, analytically, numerically, and abstractly. But I'm talking about ontologically. So I want to make that clear. So the number crops up in the natural world too. It appears everywhere. This is talking about pi. The number crops up in the natural truth. It appears everywhere. There's a circle. Of course, such as the disk of the sun, the spiral of the DNA double helix, the pupil of the eye, and the concentric rings that travel outward from splashes in the pond. So this is why pi is actually more important than phi or phi. Because pi is, it comes with, it is foundational to reality. And then from that, we can get phi. So anyway, and you look at all these things where pi is found, the DNA double helix, the sun, the pupil of the eye, the concentric rings that travel outward from splashes in a pond, waves. Pi also appears in physics that describes waves. Pi also appears in the physics that describes waves. When you have sinusoidal waves, you have a circle, you have pi. Such as ripples of light and sound. It even enters into the equation that defines how precisely we can know the state of the universe, known as Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. Finally, pi emerges in the shapes of rivers. A river's windiness is determined by its meandering ratio, or the ratio of the river's actual length to the distances from its source to its mouth as the crow flies. Rivers that flow straight from source to mouth have small meandering ratios, while one that lollygags along the way have high ones. Turns out the average meandering ratio of rivers approaches, you guessed it, pi. So anyway, the thing to understand here is like, reality is mathematical. Reality is math. Everything around you is based on relationships and ratios and interactions. Like everything is defined by math. And we experience it. It's not abstract mathematics. It's mathematics that we experience as living mathematical beings. So we have rich experiences of it. But if you think about it, everything entails mathematics. And I love, talking about like baking a cake as an example, because it's something so random. But if I have to walk over to my fridge, that is a distance, numbers. I have to get a number of ingredients. I combine them in a certain ratio. If it's a different ratio, a different mathematical pattern, I will get something else. I put it in the oven and turn up the temperature, which is again a number, and I leave it in for a certain length of time. You see, all this involves numbers because reality is number. And if any of those numbers were different, I wouldn't get a cake. I mean, they'd have to be drastically different. I mean, well, if they're slightly different, yeah, you get what I mean. If the numbers were different in a substantial way, I wouldn't get a cake. If it was left in too long, it would be burnt. If the ratio was off, it'd be something really gross and mushy. If I didn't make it to my fridge, I would never have started. Everything is number, but we have experiences of these numbers. Just like electromagnetic waves are oscillations, they're frequencies. But we experience those frequencies, those numbers, as the color red or blue or green. So an electromagnetic wave is just information. It's just a frequency. It's just a number. But we as mathematical beings, and this being a living mathematical reality, not a dead abstract mathematical reality, not just like weird numbers floating around space, but numbers that have ontological significance as sinusoids, as frequencies, as living information, we experience this information as everything, all our tactile sensations, everything, literally everything. There's nothing that it is not. So it's important to understand that mathematics is everywhere. There's nowhere that it isn't. It's like the movie, The Matrix is everywhere. It literally is, though. It is everywhere. You can't, there is no portion of existence that is not. And it doesn't mean we're in a simulation or anything like that. It means that reality is inherently, fundamentally, and necessarily and eternally mathematics. Not dead abstract mathematics, but living frequency, energy. But the world of numbers is a strange place anyway. Numbers like the square root of -1, that's the imaginary number, don't appear to make sense, but our computers and the entire modern world depend on them. Yeah, so let's talk about that. I mean, I won't talk about it. I've done videos on that. I've done videos on those numbers. Those numbers are also intrinsic to reality, but physicists don't understand them and don't know what they are. They're like, these numbers don't make any, what are these numbers? What are they? What's an imaginary number? Is it, what is it? Well, we understand it in Hyperianism as time, but they're also important to reality because reality necessarily implies the existence of these imaginary numbers. And just real quick, FYI, the word imaginary is the worst thing to call these numbers because they're not imaginary. It was a really bad choice of name. You could also call them lateral numbers. They're just expressed in a different way geometrically. They have different properties. Just like a negative number is something different than a positive number. A lateral number or an imaginary number just has different properties than those. But it's not literally imaginary. It's just that the individual who named them chose a very terrible name that causes lots of confusion. So lateral number is better. So let's see, numbers critical to computer functions. If you write programs in C++, Python, or MATLAB. I want to just move through this so we can have enough time. So, will we ever figure out why these numbers are what they are? Isn't that funny? Let me just talk about that. Dr. Sutter isn't sure. Today, we have no explanation for the origins of this constant. Indeed, we have no theoretical explanation for its existence at all. It's because numbers are existence. And anyway, we simply measure it in experiments and then plug the measured value into our equations to make other predictions. That's exactly what science does. It's a model of reality that predicts, that makes predictions. Science has no role in saying what something is. Once you say what, you can say what things do. You can say, oh, this, you can describe things. You can describe the interactions of the electromagnetic force. You can describe, gravitation. You can describe all these different things. But once you say what something is, once you make a claim that something is something, that's no longer science, that's metaphysics. Metaphysics deals in ontology, which is the nature of being, which is claims of what reality is. So anytime a scientist may say, right, if a scientist says reality is material, they're not doing science anymore, they're doing metaphysics because they've made an ontological claim about existence. So to claim that reality is material is a metaphysical claim. Anyway, I'm just saying that scientists are going outside the bounds of science, and they are terrible metaphysicians because they deny that metaphysics exists, but they are so bad at metaphysics that they don't realize that they are making metaphysical claims. Anyway, I did a whole video about that. Check out my video called, I think, What is Metaphysics? Is Metaphysics Real? Check that out. So anyway, we have no explanations for the origin of this constant. All we do is measure it. Someday, a theory of everything, a complete and unified theory of physics, might explain the existence of the fine structure constant and other constant like it. Unfortunately, we don't have a theory of everything, so we're stuck shrugging our shoulders. So here's the thing. Will we ever figure out why these numbers are and what they are? So it's funny that the answer is that they're numbers. They are fundamental to reality in that they're frequencies. And they're always looking for what is it? Is it a meter? Is it a second? Is it mass? Like, no, it's a number, it's information. And so when they're asking, like, what are these numbers? The answer is that they're numbers. So they can't see the forest for the trees. It's kind of like, yeah. But anyway, I don't want to go on long tangents. I'm trying to keep my videos shorter for algorithmic attention span ratios and all that, and more numbers. But I think you get my point here, and that it's really hilarious that you have them sort of searching for what's right in front of them. What are these numbers? They're numbers, and reality depends on them for their existence. Everything else, all these ideas of like meters and kilograms and seconds, those arise from pure numbers, pure frequencies, pure information. They're living frequencies, living numbers, and living information. Yes, they're not numbers as science imagines them, because science imagines numbers as being non-existent, and science usually imagines numbers as being something that humanity invented. But that's completely irrational. Humanity did not invent the fine structure constant, or pi or anything of that nature. It doesn't measure something that it is other than what it is. It is what it is. It's not measuring some other thing that is out there. It is existence. It is reality, and it has necessary eternal existence. It can't not exist. It must exist. Now, in this video, I haven't talked about why they must exist, but they do. They have necessary eternal existence. Reality could not be in the case where this information didn't exist. Information in the form of ontological numbers must exist. They have to exist logically. I hope you enjoyed the video. Yeah, so that's what I really want to talk to you guys about, the numbers that control the universe, and specifically the number that controls the universe. 0 as expressed by Euler's formula, or as we call it, the source formula, net result, of course. And always keep that in mind. You know, when you go about your day, look about you and realize what you're doing is you're experiencing numbers, you're experiencing information, everything you do, you know, walking a certain distance, you know, eating a certain amount, making something with certain ratios. Just really realize how everything that you are doing is a product of mathematical information, and you'll start to see reality in a whole new way. And ultimately, when you start to understand these things, you realize that they have wildly important implications to existence, and it changes the way you live your life ultimately, because you start realizing that you're not just a dead, lifeless, worthless piece of matter that's going to die and decay in the dust and never exist again and just blink out of existence. You are rather a eternal subjective center of the universe as a mathematical being yourself, and you are responsible for the existence of the universe as being expressions of our internal frequency patterns. So I hope you enjoyed that, my friends. Check out my other videos as well. I want to give a big shout out to everyone who supports on Patreon, especially Trent, Cassidy, Renaissance Fairy, Michael, Evie, Alan, Angela, Maria, Brian, John, Chubby Bunny, and High Expectations Counseling. Thank you all so very much. I appreciate it. If you enjoy my work, consider supporting on Patreon. You'll be able to access our secret live streams. We're having one right after this, and we're going to take a look at a video that dives into this topic even more. So check that out. You can be a part of that. You'll get access to our weekly secret Discord. You'll get access to our hidden Discord server, the Citadel, and a lot more. The link will pop up right over here, and it really helps out a lot. So I appreciate it very much.